Good evening. Welcome to this Plan South meeting. In the absence of the chair, I will be, as vice chair, chairing the meeting this evening. I will be an acting chair, and we'll try without a vice chair. So if I miss anybody, please put your hand up again. Thank you. We'll start off with the webcasting introduction. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet or filmed and will be capable of repeated viewing or any other use by such third parties. If you are seated in the lower public seating area, it is likely that the recording cameras will capture your image, and this will result in the possibility that your image will become part of the broadcast. This may infringe your human and data protection rights, and if you wish to avoid this, you should move to the upper public gallery. Thank you. So, good evening, members. The officers present this evening are Andrew Marks, Graham Courtney on the screens, and Adrian Hendry here in the chamber. The advice to public and speakers attending the council are in pages 5 to 8 of the minutes of the agenda. Item 2, the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 3rd of November, which have been circulated and are on pages 9 to 14. Is there any comments, or can I take that as agreed? Thank you. I'll sign them. Item 4, apologies for absence.
Yes, Chairman, we have apologies from Councillors Cher Bernier, Barlow, Neville, Rackham, Roberts, Rizvi and Sunga, and apologies for lateness from Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you. Item 5, declarations of interest, members.
Yeah, item 11.
Yeah, that's where we are now, yeah.
Yeah, so item number 11 is my neighbour. So I know him, and he's the dad at the school where my stepdaughter goes to. And item number 12 is the local pub as well. So I know the people there as well.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it's in relation to the Gardener's Arms item. Basically, it's just to declare that I am a member of the Hills Amenity Society, although I am just a member and not a member of the committee. So I wouldn't have been involved in drafting their response.
Thank you. Item 6, any other business?
No other business, Chairman.
I should declare the same interest. It's a non-pecuniary, obviously, but as a member of the Hills Amenity Society.
Thank you. So any other business? Item 7 is the policy briefing note that we're all aware of. It's there at every meeting. Item 8, site visits, which we'll probably mention a little bit later on item 9. We go on to item 9, the first of the planning applications, EPF 197221 for Ely Place, Chigwell, to consider, the attached report for a proposed first floor side extension. The officer's report, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully you can all hear me okay.
Good, thank you.
So this application is for a first floor side extension, repositioned entrance and front porch, and a first floor landing window. The application was previously included on last month's agenda, but was deferred for a site visit, which was arranged for the 25th of November.
Apologies, can we just dim the lights slightly, please? Getting the glare from the screen.
I'll just give you a minute for that. The application is in front of members due to an objection from the parish council and a neighbouring resident, and is recommended for approval, subject to conditions. The site contains a detached dwelling with a forward-positioned linked garage with the neighbour at number 3. Given the positioning of the dwellings, there is a sizable gap of around 7 metres between the neighbouring flank wall and the shared boundary with the application site. There are 2 large preserved trees, one of which is on the site and the other within the neighbouring site. You see here. This shows the rear of the site and its relationship with the neighbours. The significant additions to number 5 can be seen in this slide. So this is the existing ground floor plan and shows the front of the site area. This is the existing first floor plan. This shows a comparison between the existing and the proposed front elevation. The first floor side elevation, as you can see, would be built above the existing ground floor extension. This shows the existing and proposed street scene, as can be seen here. The extension would be partially screened by the existing garage. This also shows significant separation between number 3 and number 4 and the site context with number 5. Whilst the new first floor extension would introduce a fairly large crown roof addition, it is considered that this is proportionate and appropriate in design for this property. Here's the proposed floor plans. So given the large garden at number 3, it is not considered that the first floor extension would detrimentally impact on the amenities of these neighbours. The only first floor window serves a bathroom. Sorry, I haven't got my pointer on, but I don't know if you can see my pointer here. And this would obviously be obscure glazed. The only aspect of the development that would impact number 5 is the introduction of a new first floor landing window, which again can be obscure glazed. Given this, the application is considered to be acceptable and is recommended for approval, subject to conditions. Back to you, members.
Thank you. We have one speaker on this application, Mr. Barry Yarwood, who, Mr. Yarwood, you have 3 minutes.
Hello, I'm Barry Yarwood. I live at 3 Ely Place, a property directly next door to 4. The proposed extension does not... I would like to comment on the District Council report about the development of number 4 Ely Place. The proposed extension does not represent an overdevelopment, particularly in the context of recently approved extension to nearby properties. However, none of the recently approved extensions to nearby properties are in such close proximity to a neighbour's garden, particularly a 2-storey extension. This extension will be 400 millimetres from our joint boundary and just 6 foot from the trunk of the oak tree. The report states the proposed first floor side extension would be added above the existing footprint of the ground floor side extension, and as such it would have a limited impact on the visual and residential amenity of the occupiers of the immediate neighbouring property at number 3. My response is the District Council report that the proposed extension would have visual or limited residential amenity. There's been a limited visit on the 25th, I've just heard, but I wasn't there. I would have allowed them to come into my garden to see the proposed extension and what visual impact it would have on our site. The report also states there is good separation between the proposed extension and the flank elevation of number 3, with screening provided by the TPO protected oak tree in my back garden. Now, the screening provided by the tree is only good for 6 months of the year, when the oak tree is in full leaf. For the other 6 months, there are no leaves, so leaving a development with an overbearing physical and visual impact. The report from the Trees and Landscape Department objects to this development, with the main concern being the future livability with a tree so close to the building. It states trees in relation to design demolition and construction, the recommendations guides us to consider future livability issues at an application stage, in particular where large trees at close proximity to dwellings may lead to apprehension by current and future residents that the trees may fall and hit their house, that they are overbearing on their house, or that they are causing excessive shading. It also states that if this application is developed as proposed, it is foreseeable that there will be future pressure for tree removals or to allow excessive work to trees contrary to the Council's tree work policies. The decision by the District Council to approve this development is going against both the local parish and the tree and landscapes reports and recommendations, which is why I'm here today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Councillor Lyon.
Thank you, Jim. It's a simple question, actually, in terms of clarification. I wasn't able to go on the site visit, which I think there was a site visit for this one. And there was a point made by, in the presentation by Mr. Courtney, I think it was slide 3 or 4, which showed the separation, but it was rather quick, and I didn't actually see exactly what the distance of separation was. And since it was mentioned by the objector, I would like to see that picture again, if I may.
Can we get that picture on the screen?
Yeah, no problem, no problem. Let me just reshare. I know it's not the one that I referred to, the separation, but I think initially the location plan actually kind of initially shows that the sort of separation we're talking about. So this is the 7 metres that I referred to is the sort of distance between the boundary here and the flank wall of the neighbour. I sort of mentioned it in this plan, which actually is, given the angle of it, it isn't necessarily the greatest plan to show that that separation. The other one, which is I did think is quite a good picture showing that sort of this visual separation, is this plan. So it's 7 metres between here and here. I think the objector said it's 400 millimetres. I think it's actually 450, but it is, it is unarguably fairly close to the boundary here. The existing ground floor extension is only 450 millimetres from the boundary, and it would be on there, which I'm sure members, you're all aware, is less than we would often ask for. But I think with the visual separation in this instance, and obviously the presence of the TPO tree, that's why it was felt in this particular case why that wasn't as problematic. That's why officers reached that conclusion. But yeah, so that's the 7 metres distance. Would you like me to leave this up? The plans?
Chairman, if I may come back, there is a reference in the information about an appeal, and that there was a number of issues raised there, but I don't think they were very upheld on the appeal. So I'd be interested from the officer to confirm exactly where we stand in terms of that appeal with this application.
Yeah, sure. Well, interestingly, the appeal that's referred to is actually on the next door site. It's actually not this application site. It's number 5, which, as you can see, has been substantially extended. There was a refusal previously, and one of the issues that was raised by the council in that instance was the impact on the trees. We felt that given the proximity to the tree, it would result in, again, similar to what the landscape officer is concerned about in this instance, the sort of pressure to remove the tree. But that was appealed, and the inspector didn't support us on that one. They felt that there wouldn't be the sort of pressure to remove those trees. So that's, even though it's unusually not an appeal on this site, it is obviously a relevant appeal decision, so that the officer has taken into account. It is a different site, it is a different extension. By all means, there are differences in that, but it is a very similar example recently. I think it was 2017, the decision on that. But it was actually number 5, this property here.
Thank you. Members, I have to apologise. Having called for the site visit, I was unable to attend. I was in Scotland when the notification came through and had a hospital appointment for that day. So I really would have liked to have gone down there, but it was impossible. Any other members? Councillor Pond.
I wonder whether the officer could show us again the street scene diagram, drawing. That's the one, thank you very much. It just strikes me that we should be aware, I think, if we grant permission for this application, we are actually witnessing the conversion of what you might call a close of individual detached houses at some distance from each other to what is a not unattractive but definitely is a kind of village arrangement of conjoined or houses or houses in very close proximity. So I think that's just a factor in this application.
Thank you. Councillor Jennings.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I just wonder, Mr. Courtney, do you have a slide which shows the, if you like, the proposed end wall that the neighbour at number 3 will be faced with?
Yes, that would be this one here. So this at present is what's there. So this is the single-storey extension, and then this is what number 3 would see with the first floor extension. Obviously, again, as stated in the report, there's some vegetation and the TPO tree that offers some screening. But as you've heard from the objector, that is it's a deciduous tree. So I think that's right. So obviously, it's not going to be leafed all year round. So it doesn't offer screening all year round. But yeah, so that's the elevation that they would be looking at.
Thank you very much, Mr. Courtney. I'm just concerned that obviously that's a very, very big wall. I know it's got the single-storey extension at the moment, but that's obviously at sort of fence height and a little bit above and is less, if you like, domineering. But that is a very big flank wall full of brick, and as the objector pointed out, if he's got a deciduous oak tree, well, he's going to be looking at that 3 months of the year. And given the arrangement of the houses, that's going to go I think it's about halfway down his back garden, according to the plan on the agenda, which I don't think is quite right. I'm concerned about that, but thank you.
Any other members wish to speak? Councillor Wexley.
Yeah, I think it would have been helpful if the tree could have been included in those drawings. I don't know if Mr. Courtney can perhaps point out more clearly where this tree would be in relationship to the flank wall and the distance between the tree and the flank wall.
Yep, I don't disagree. It can be useful sometimes to have the vegetation and certainly trees shown on a plan. Although equally, sometimes it can paint a very different picture when you add the trees in. But obviously, it is a requirement to show trees on the actual plans, and this would be the TPO tree. I'm not entirely convinced about the scale. Certainly, when you then look at this, it looks like it's quite a large tree, whereas this makes it seem like it's something not quite so significant. So, looking at the sort of location there, and also sort of taking this plan here, I would, and I'm flicking back and forth. Apologies. I would say it is kind of roughly sort of in this front half of the extension here, this kind of front part here. But it is a significant tree for much of the year, so obviously would screen quite a lot of that flank wall. But I certainly understand the concerns, about that. As I said earlier, it is closer than we would usually like for a two-storey extension, and it is marginally on marginally higher ground as well. This site to the neighbour.
Councillor Wixley coming back.
If I could just come back on that point, Chairman. I'm looking at condition number 6, which refers to the tree. I think I would have liked to have a bit more information of what's proposed in order under this tree protection plan. You know, I can read that, but it doesn't actually tell me what it's going to be. So I'm a little bit concerned about this, I have to say. Would have liked more information.
Does the officer have any further information? I presume it's on the construction method and the...
Yeah,
road
sorry,
protection.
I didn't realise Councillor Wixley wanted an actual response. Yeah, usually it would be with regards to, as you say, construction methods, certainly fencing, that's an important part of it, and it's even down to, I mean, obviously this is a tree outside of their site, so it is more limited on the sort of what they can do, but it's also things like storage of materials. What you don't want is people storing building materials and parking construction vehicles and things like that under trees. So it's kind of it is the wealth of information we get in with the tree protection, but certainly it is about fencing, ensuring there's no damage during construction, and obviously the actual construction itself can take place without damaging roots and whatnot. So they can be quite detailed reports.
Thank you. Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted some clarity actually around extensions, side extensions, and the distance you need to be from the boundary as per our council policies, because I was under the impression that we needed to be at least a metre away from the boundary in order to have a two-storey extension. But can I just have that confirmed, please?
Yep, as I sort of mentioned in the presentation and earlier on, we would normally ask for a metre. Certainly the existing adopted local plan, the supporting text, the designer built environment policies do state that a minimum of a metre should be provided to sort of stop the terracing effect and ensure that there is open space between houses. So yeah, normally it is a metre.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Heap.
If it's normally a metre, then why is it exceptional in this circumstance?
Well, again, as I said earlier, I think that the reason we've accepted, or officers are making the recommendation they are, obviously we've not accepted anything, in this instance is because obviously there is a significant distance between the properties. The chances of a terracing effect between these two properties, given that distance, is non-existent from this dwelling, because we're not going to allow a 7-metre extension on that property. I think you've got more chance of a new house going in that sort of gap. But also obviously the presence of the TPO tree stops any development too close to this property here, which again, going back to Councillor Wixley's point, I think actually it would have been very useful to have seen the tree on this plan, because you could have actually seen sort of the barrier that creates between the two properties. But that's why in this instance the case officer has reached a conclusion that they have, but certainly yeah, we would. It is slightly against what we would normally ask for. Yeah, a metre is fairly standard, and we are usually quite tough on that.
Thank you. Any other members? We have a recommended decision to grant permission with the conditions that are listed. Could we go to a vote on granting permission in accordance with those conditions? All those in favour?
None, Chairman.
All those against?
3, Chairman.
Abstentions?
Quite a few, Chairman. 10, Chairman.
Then we have a vote for refusal. So we need now a motion for refusal and reasons behind it.
Sorry, because I came late and I missed part of the presentation, I'm not sure whether I can cast a vote.
I don't think you can.
That's
vote
fine,
on
that's
that.
fine. So just discount my abstention.
Thank you. Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I suggest the lack of space between the two properties' boundaries, e.g. it's only got 450 centimetres instead of the usual 1 metre, and the overbearing nature of the double-storey brick wall.
Do you have a seconder for that motion? Thank you. Members, we have a vote for refusal on the reasons just stated. All those in favour of that vote for refusal? Those against? Abstentions? Thank you. That has been refused. Could we look at a way forward? Presumably it's to go back to a metre away from the boundary. Are we happy with that as a way forward? Yep. Thank you. Thank you, members. Going on to the next item, which is EPF 203221, 3 Shelley Grove, which is proposed conversion of existing dwelling into 2 self-contained flats. Have the officer's report, please.
Thank you, Chairman.
Can we have the lights down?
So,
Thank you.
So this application proposes to convert the existing dwelling into 2 self-contained flats. This would involve a new single-storey side extension and the widening of the existing crossover. This application is before committee due to an objection from the Town Council, the Loughton Residents Association Planners Group and a number of local residents. The application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions and a legal agreement. Shelley Grove is a small road characterised by large detached dwellings that vary in design and scale. The existing site is a single detached dwelling with a side garage and parking to the front. This shows the site within the context of the road. As you can see, the properties do vary in their design. This is another view of its context, but it also shows the significant parking area to the front of the immediate neighbour. This shows the rear of the property. So this is the existing dwelling. It's a 4-bed detached single dwelling house. The proposed development would replace the existing garage with a single-storey extension here and would convert the detached dwelling into 2 two-bedroom flats, one on the ground floor and one on the first floor. It's also proposed to widen the existing crossover to allow 4 vehicles to park on the front. You can just see this small plan down here. Whilst the introduction of flats would be a slight anomaly in this particular road, which is characterised by large detached single dwelling houses, the appearance of the building is largely unchanged, and the provision of 2 flats is on balance considered to be to not significantly alter the character of the area. Similarly, whilst the proposal would intensify the parking within the front garden, this would not be dissimilar to the situation at the neighbouring property and indeed other surrounding dwellings. For these reasons, it is considered that on balance the application is acceptable and therefore it's recommended for approval, subject to conditions and a legal agreement. Back to you, members.
Thank you. We have two speakers on this application.
The next one.
Sorry. Sorry, you're quite correct. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself. Yeah, members, the ward councillors are councillors Kaufman and councillors Judy Jennings. Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. This application site is a small cul-de-sac which is approached by a single lane, narrow road. The houses are all detached family residences with their own driveways and their own front gardens. The application to convert one of these family homes into 2 flats is an undesirable change of use that is contrary to the original design, and it would set an unwelcome precedent in this whole area, which is an area of exclusively family homes. The houses on either side and opposite to this house object very strongly to this application, as do many other residents in this area of Loughton. The proposed development, I think, would be similar to a cuckoo in the nest, an alien intruder introducing a change that would be totally out of keeping with the rest of the houses and the character of the houses in this surrounding area. The suggestion of a shared rear garden, in my mind, is a recipe for conflict of interest, shall we say, between the residents of the 2 flats. And the fact that the front garden is going to be completely given over to 4 parking spaces would harm the visual amenity for the neighbours. By the council asking for a 106 agreement from the applicant, I think that means the council acknowledges that there will be an increase in recreational pressures on the FSAC and also a net gain in the traffic that will be generated. Although in their report they say there wouldn't be, but I think the fact that they've asked for this agreement and it has been agreed shows the opposite, shows the contrary. So for all these reasons, I shall not be supporting this application.
Councillor Kaufman, did you wish to?
Thank you, Chairman. I want to be brief. I think our policy DBE 11 is pretty explicit about this, that we shouldn't give consent if it creates an undesirable precedent, and that's the damning point here. So I think we're stuck. Our existing policies say if it creates an undesirable precedent that we shouldn't give consent. There are other points as well, but that's the material one as far as I'm concerned. If we let this one through, we wouldn't be able to realistically stop others happening, and that intensification of use is a problem for the SAC, it's a problem for the character of the area. So it's a difficult one to support, and I'm slightly surprised it's before us. Thank you.
Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chairman. I echo the comments that have already been made, particularly around the precedent setting of turning this dwelling into 2 flats. What I wanted the officer to clarify is, because obviously we're looking at this in terms of its setting, where is the nearest development which has been converted in a similar fashion? Secondly, where is the refuse collection point from the plan? I may have missed it when you gave your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I haven't stated where the refuse collection is, and I must admit it doesn't actually show that on there. I mean, obviously there is a side access. Sorry, I've been with your last question first. There is a side access that goes out to the communal garden, which would be similar to obviously when this was houses is now as a single dwelling. Obviously, when bin day comes around, most people will store their bins either in a garage if they have it, or in their back garden and drag those through to the front. This is obviously only a pair of masonettes. It's not a block of flats, so you wouldn't expect the big communal bins. These would likely just have wheelie bins, albeit twice as many as you would have on a single dwelling house. So the expectation would be that there is space within the rear for those to be stored and pulled through. In terms of other nearby flats, it's not something I have to hand at the moment. I'm not sure how easy that would even be to see or to find. I mean, I do agree, and again, it was in the presentation that the character of this particular street is very much of large detached dwelling houses. I completely understand the councillor's points in terms of the sort of precedent this may set. As I say, it was a very balanced case for the officer. I think the main reason the recommendation is as it is because of the limited change in terms of the external appearance and whether this would even read as a pair of flats. Obviously, it is only 2 flats. It's not a block of flats. I think other properties in the road would certainly have more scope to intensify much more than this, and I think that would certainly have a significant impact on the character of the road. But yeah, I'm not sure I can unfortunately give you that answer, but I do know, obviously, the wider surrounding area, as I'm sure all of you members know, it is dominantly large single residential dwellings around that area. I mean, really, you are sort of talking as you get more towards the high road, really, when you start getting sort of flats. So yeah, it is predominantly large single houses around there.
Thank you. Councillor Murray, sorry.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I rarely speak on planning, but I have to say when I read this agenda, and I do know Shelley Grove a little bit, I just found it really difficult to believe that there was a recommendation to pass this one. I would endorse everything that the 2 members have said, and in answer to Councillor Patel, I mean, I live the other side of the railway line. I personally think it's the better side, but market forces would dictate that Shelley Grove, Ticehurst and Spareleys is the better side, and I can't think of any development in those 3 roads where individual houses are being turned into flats. So this is a very dangerous precedent, and we should say no to it.
Councillor Patel coming back, and then I'm coming to.
No, Chairman, I think we should move forward with a recommendation for refusal on the basis that this is going to bring an unwelcome precedent to its its setting.
I think that's where we're going. I've got 2 other speakers that have wanted to speak, so I'll be with you. Councillor Pond.
I agree with Councillor Patel. We should proceed to a reason for refusal, but I think one of the major reasons for refusal is that this site is within 640 yards as the fumes travel to the special area of conservation. And if one of these houses, and there are perhaps 150 of them on that particular estate, were to be split into flats, you would get a very sizable increase in the number of motor vehicles, and that can be proved by the fact that the applicant has put 4 parking spaces all over his front garden, which in itself I think is very undesirable. You know, that's your proof on the page, so to speak.
One more councillor wishes to speak. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you. I'm just having a look through the NPPF paragraph 130, and firstly, I agree with everything that all the councillors are saying. But I think just to give a slightly more of a kind of a balanced view, I mean, part of the decision-making process should be when making decisions on developments, the decision makers should be sympathetic to the local character history, including the surrounding built environment and landscape setting, while not preventing or discouraging appropriate innovation or change. Now, of course, we've spoken about the character. The question is, on balance, are we preventing or discouraging appropriate innovation or change, such as increased densities? I think the reality is, whilst it's certainly innovative, having all houses and then all of a sudden you've got 2 flats, I'm not quite sure it is appropriate because of the reasons that have been cited, whether it's the precedent setting or just the kind of perhaps it is a bit overly built for the road it's on. So very much echoing what's been said by the other councillors, really. But I did want to highlight 130 because it does, there is a balancing act to be had between maintaining a local character, but at the same time not preventing or discouraging appropriate innovation. But in this case, it's not necessarily appropriate.
Thank you for that. Members, we have a recommendation to grant permission. I think I know where it might be going. Can we have a vote on the... Was that a formal motion? Sorry, it's a formal
well,
motion.
what I was proposing to do, Mr. Chairman, is to defer to the ward members to suggest the reasons for refusal. But if an appropriate motion was put forward, I would certainly support it.
Okay. Can we have a motion for refusal, please?
So may I propose that we refuse this application because it is contrary to policy DBE 11 and it is likely to result in an intensification of use, which would create an undesirable precedent and detract from the character of the surrounding area. I think we need our normal SAC provision for the intensification of use and the effect on the special area of conservation as well.
Thank you.
Happy to listen to any other comments.
Thank you. Seconded. Thank you. Members, we have a motion for refusal on the... Councillor Lartad. Okay. Can we go ahead with the vote? All those in favour of the motion for refusal?
Looks like unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. And the way forward? There is no way forward? Sorry, Councillor. Okay, thank you. Thank you. That has been refused. We will now go on to the next item, which is EPF 213721, 14 Ashfields, which is internal alterations, etc.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is for a single-storey rear extension. Sorry, let me flick over to this. Single-storey rear extension, first floor side extension, some new roof lights and some changes to the front garden. The application is before members due to an objection from the Town Council, the Loughton Residents Association Planners Group and 2 neighbouring residents. The application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions. The application site is a detached dwelling with a single-storey side projection and off-street parking to the front. This shows the existing elevations of the dwelling. So the proposal would add a 3-metre deep flat-roofed single-storey rear extension across the entire back of the house and a first floor side extension atop the existing and proposed single-storey side projections that would stretch the depth of the property. This would have a dual-ridged slack-pitch roof to reflect that of the main dwelling. This shows the existing dwelling, which is a 4-bed property with a very narrow attached garage and an awkward entrance. The proposed extensions shown here would create a 5-bed unit, although there would also be an additional internal, what's marked up as study/snug, that would provide a better laid out and enlarged ground floor. This would include the provision of an appropriately sized usable garage. The front would be largely paved to further increase off-street parking, although there would be some small planted areas retained or added. Some concerns have been raised regarding potential drainage issues. However, land drainage have been consulted and responded, stating that the site is not at risk of flooding, nor would it impact on drainage or flooding elsewhere. Originally, Juliet balconies were proposed to the rear, which have been removed. Given the positioning of the site and the presence of the neighbour's garage here, it is not considered there would be any detrimental impact on neighbour and amenity as a result of this development. This slide also highlights a nearby property that is extended to the side in a very similar way to this proposal. There are some other examples of two-storey side extensions that can also be seen within the immediate locality, which shows that the proposal would not be out of character or an overdevelopment of this site. As such, the application is considered to be acceptable and is therefore recommended for approval, subject to conditions. Back to you, members.
Thank you. We do have two speakers on this application. So the first one is Kevin Story, who is the objector. Thank you. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Story.
I hope you've got the documents that I've sent in previously. I have one or two issues with the officer's report to committee. He says this isn't in a conservation area, but Ashfields is between York Hill and Baldwins Hill conservation areas, and it's not going to do too much for them if this becomes high-density, near-terraced properties, which is the appearance that it'll give. He says it's in a built-up part of Loughton. I think that's a bit of a stretch given the amount of forest land around Ashfields. He says there's a mixture of two-storey houses and bungalows. There aren't any bungalows. The end of Ashfields are two-storey houses that step down the hill. He says 3 Ashfields has been extended at side and first floor levels, yes, but not to its full depth at first floor level, and certainly not across the rear. You can see that from the aerials. He says he consulted the FDC land drainage officers, but has Thames Water been asked as the body with responsibility for a shared private drain, which is what exists at the rear? And it depends on the question you ask. If you ask, is there a general flooding risk, then no. But if you ask about the rear drain specifically, which is mainly for foul drainage and small areas of yard drainage, not the main roof areas which go to the front into Ashfields, then you might get a different answer to that question. He also says that my original statement that there's no precedent for an extension of this size is unsubstantiated. There isn't anything else of this size. You can see that from the aerials. How has he measured that? Because his OS is out of date for a start. There aren't any major rearward extensions, certainly not full width or 3 metres deep. One Baldwins backs onto trees and is a different shallower house type. 1A Baldwins is to the side extension with a very, very small rear ground floor extension. 3A is on the corner of Ashfields, so it just looks down the road and it's a shallower house type. And I've already mentioned 3 Ashfields. He says it's similar in character to 3 Ashfields and 1A Baldwins Hill. Both of those were delegated decisions, as was 3A Baldwins. I never got an opportunity to object to any of them. Only one Baldwins was a committee decision over 20 years ago. This will substantially alter the streetscape in Ashfields, which right now is still relatively similar. He says that it'll build back in line with the rear building line of 12A, which I live in. Does that mean all the shallower depth houses can have large rear extensions too, or that I can build forward to 14's front building line? Probably not. Why not? In summary, the rear drain was never designed for this. This extension is going to build right over the top of it, and I understand that the applicant bought the property without knowing about that. This is a huge extension of 55% with an alteration to the streetscape. Imagine if everybody that could built a 55% increase in size of their house. 3 out of the 4 extension precedent decisions have not been committee decisions. So the question to me is, are the officers creating their own precedents and then using them to justify more of the same or worse? Because that's the way it looks to me. That looks pretty iniquitous, undemocratic and unfair. That's it. If you've got any questions, okay. Otherwise, I'll leave it all up to you.
Thank you. turn your microphone off.
Beg your pardon.
Thank you. The second speaker is joining us by Zoom, and is the applicant, Mr. Mike. Sorry, you're here. Sorry, it says Zoom. Sorry, and he's here. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Prince.
Good evening. My name's Michael Prince. I'm the applicant and owner of the subject property. Thank you for the opportunity to meet you all this evening. The panel in front of me, Eric, and most importantly, my neighbours. I really appreciate the time everyone has invested into my proposals. Our planning case officer, David Maguire, has kindly reached to the opinion for a recommendation to grant approval for this pending application. It would certainly be remiss to offer any of my unqualified assessment. I love living in Loughton. I've lived locally for many years. You know, you can't beat the forest on your doorstep. My kids have grown up in Loughton. They love the forest and going to the high street. Ruby, my eldest, goes dancing at St John's Church every Saturday. My wife, Charlotte, and I have vested interest in the community. My 2 eldest children go to Staples Road and my youngest is in Little Lambs. What matters most to me, ultimately, is the decision which impacts my neighbours, my family and future generations. I want this to be a positive experience for everyone, including my neighbours, who my family and I value very much. As newest members to Ashfield, we want to make a positive contribution. We have a great deal of respect for the characteristic and appearance as well as the security in the cul-de-sac, which is why I have joint neighbourhood watch due to, you know, my neighbours being burgled. Subject to a positive outcome of the planning permission, any subsequent works will progress in full collaboration with everyone influenced by the work, and that's my personal commitment made. I've grown up with my parents renovating houses. My daughter Ruby is keen with property development and construction, and I think most will agree with me that there's no better learning platform from any house owner to see a high quality project come to life. Leading up to this committee meeting, we've worked closely with the local authority to deliver a design befitting Ashfield's prestigious setting, incorporating all feedback from the public consultations diligently. The design will include modern construction techniques, sustainable features and minimise waste, all geared for future-proofing this asset for generations to enjoy. In summary, the scale and layout of the proposal as presented to the committee tonight have been carefully considered, having reviewed all local and national planning policies and design guidance. As a growing family, we have planned to settle and enjoy in this property and the neighbourhood for many years to come. As part of the remodelling works, we've considered all the following criteria in mind. Taking the householder permitted development design guidance as a baseline for the development where possible, in both the permitted depth and height of the rear extension, we have only requested for what we as a medium-sized family at this current moment would practically require, i.e. not going the 4 metres in depth and 4 metres in height up to the parapet line. Furthermore, the key objection point regarding the original proposed Juliet balconies to the rear bedrooms, as stated in the government's technical guidance that a balcony is understood to be a platform with a rail, balustrade or parapet projecting outside an upper storey of a building, a Juliet balcony where there is no platform and therefore no external access would normally be permitted development. However, we respect the concern of the neighbours as well as the parish council and have removed from our plans. I've also got the plans from Thames Water that the drainage runs along the front of our house, and again all will be considered and dealt with appropriately. Thank you for listening.
Board councillors are Caroline Pond and Councillor Bob Jennings. Do either of you wish to speak? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. We're just arguing about who goes first. The objector came out with a long list of issues as he sees them. I wonder if Mr Courtney could respond to those issues, basically, especially in terms of the 55% increase in the size of the property and obviously these drainage issues, which are of concern. But I'd also like to know how much, once the property is developed, how much amenity space will be left, and does Mr Courtney consider that to be appropriate for the size of property? Thank you.
No problem. Well, I mean, the 55% increase, I mean, we do have to look at proportionate extensions, and it largely comes down to, in locations such as this, it largely comes down to what can be accommodated on the site, how, whether it can be accommodated within the requirements of the local plan, whether it can be accommodated without impacting on neighbours. The percentage issue is more of an issue when you're talking sort of greenbelt sites and things like that. I mean, a 55% increase, yes, it's a large amount, but in an urban area, if a site can take such an increase, I don't see why that would be a reason in itself to refuse permission. Certainly, I'm sure all members will be aware we have a number of properties in urban locations such as Loughton, Buckerstill, Chigwell that increase significantly, and even looking at, actually, I'll just reshare my screen if you don't mind, just because I've got it in front of me here. Just looking at obviously this precedent plan that we've got. I mean, you can see there are some sort of properties that have significantly increased in terms of scale, and I don't see that in itself would be an issue if the design is acceptable, if the impact on neighbours is acceptable. The drainage issue, all I can say is we've consulted our land drainage section. Oh, sorry, was I sharing the screen then? I don't think I pressed a button. My apologies. But yeah, all I can say is we've consulted land drainage. They're obviously the council's experts on all the drainage issues, foul and surface water drainage and flooding. They have come back raising no objections and saying this is fine. I'm not a drainage expert myself. I certainly couldn't tell you where the drains run or anything like that. I can just rely on the expert advice that we seek, and I will probably have to come back to you about the level of amenity space retained, because I don't have that in front of me, but I can certainly work that out for you. So if we go back to other members' questions, I'll come back on that if that's okay.
Councillor Pond, do you wish to, as ward councillor?
Hang on a minute. Different classes. Right, thank you. Right, this end of Ashfields does have similar houses on either side. At the end of the cul-de-sac, there are about 3 or 4 houses which are different, and in fact they do look rather like bungalows, as someone said, but they're not bungalows. And there's 4 houses round the side, round the junction of Ashfields and Baldwin's Hill as well, which are the same sort of style. So I think you could say it could affect the character of the street. You mentioned the conservation area. The conservation area isn't those particular houses, but it is between them, so you wouldn't want it to look completely out of place. The residents talked about the drainage is one of his objections, but I think the fact that the drainage officer has said there isn't, that's difficult, would be difficult to sustain. And the Juliet balconies have now been removed, which is good, I'd have thought. And I'd like to know about the 55% increase as well. I think you've answered that one, haven't you? So it does say it's a substantial 2-storey side extension. So I think that's what we've got. It is also, looks quite large, the new one.
Thank you. Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chairman. My comment is really around what's been mentioned regarding the location of the site being between 2 conservation areas. Albeit the property is not in a conservation area, but is that not a material consideration when determining this application? Because it would have, can it be argued that it could have an impact on, well, can that be considered as a material consideration?
I would suggest here is not. See, the policy, obviously our local plan policies do talk about developments within or adjacent to conservation areas, and certainly that is there to capture the fact that something that's not in the conservation area obviously can have an impact, and that's certainly something that we can and do look at. I think we would be pushing it on this particular case. I don't know whether it might be. Sorry, I'm still sharing my screen. If you don't mind, I'm just going to share a different screen because what this actually shows is the conservation areas. So this is probably not particularly clear. I imagine in the up on the screen it's not the clearest, so I'll just indicate. So this here is the conservation area to the north, and then probably slightly clearer, this red outline here is the York Hill conservation area. The site in question is here. So it certainly doesn't adjoin. It's not immediately adjacent to. I think we would be pushing it to say that any extensions on this property would have any particular impact on either of these conservation areas. And I certainly wouldn't want to try and defend anything like that on an appeal. So I wouldn't recommend. I wouldn't suggest it's a material consideration in this particular instance, given the sort of distances. Yes, it's a unique situation in that it is between two conservation areas, but in my mind, it's not close enough to have any direct impact on either. Just while I'm here as well, sorry, while I'm talking, just going to come back to Councillor Jennings. So I've had a quick calculation. I'm just going to stop sharing that. Sorry, and it looks like there'd be approximately 150 square metres of amenity space retained for the property. I mean, obviously that's a fair size. I don't know if members may recall that in our adopted local plan there is guidance about the level of amenity space, and that does suggest 20 square metres per habitable room. So even if we sort of took worked it out based on that, it would meet those requirements. So yeah, that's the answer to that one as well.
Thank you. Councillor Lyon.
Thank you, Chairman. I was interested in the water management. I think Mr. Courtney said about the land drainage people, but I don't think that was what the objector was talking about. I think it was the wastewater, the sewage and soil that was the problem at the rear of the property. I've looked at the application on the portal and I don't see any reference to the water administration. And I don't know whether that's Thames Water an alternative, and should there not have been a consultation with them to see, considering the intensification as such, that would have been something that would have necessarily needed to be considered?
No, we wouldn't usually consult with Thames Water on sort of household applications such as this. We do on certain applications, certainly large scale schemes, new housing estates, things like that, where they will have to provide additional infrastructure. But certainly we wouldn't on schemes such as this. I mean, it is more of a building regulations issue, the wastewater. They obviously will have to get their building regulations approval, and that would involve those linkages. So yeah, it wouldn't really be something that would be material to this consideration, the actual waste connection.
Thank you. Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so I live in Forest Side on the map. I have approval for a 6-metre back extension, so there's another precedent there. I mean, literally the opposite neighbour, number 3, has the exact same side extension. 1A Baldwin's Hill has the same. I think we'd struggle because there's so many precedents in the area on why we wouldn't approve it. Just a quick question as well. On his back extension, could that be done under permitted development? Because it's 3 metres, isn't it?
Certainly part of it could. They couldn't go across the entire, I keep flicking back and forth to plans, but it's quite useful to have them in front of members while I'm talking. So they couldn't go the entire width of the property, because obviously this is additional as well. So if I just click back here, so they could certainly go, well actually they could go 4 metres without planning, without any sort of consent from us beyond this point here. They could also potentially do some form of side extension, but they couldn't infill this part, so they couldn't do exactly what it is that they're proposing. But yes, they could do a 4 metre deep single-storey rear extension. They could potentially do a 3 metre deep 2-storey rear extension, although that would be subject to other limitations. And obviously there is the prior approval route as well, whereas you know you can go up to 8 metres in depth at single-storey, but obviously that is subject to consultation and potential assessment by the planning officers.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan coming back, and then...
Yeah, I mean, the bulk of it could be done anyway. The side that's in question with the double storey above the garage pretty much hasn't got any neighbours because it backs onto a garden. I don't think it's too contentious, to be honest, given that half the other neighbours have done it.
Thank you. Councillor Pond.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I think I can clear up the conundrum about conservation areas, because until 1995 this was in the conservation area and it was removed from the conservation area by a decision of the council based on advice from the then conservation officer. So that's why I think some of the houses hereabouts have got, for instance, Victorian-style lampposts. But they are a development of the late 1960s. And they were on the site of one house, perhaps the most architecturally distinguished house in Loughton, which was called Ashford's Lodge. And the developers of the time crammed quite a large amount into a fairly small site. And that means that the amount of private amenity space is fairly small, although the layout of the road was done on quite expansive lines with standard frontages. Now, we get a lot of these applications to enlarge houses, and this one I think is nearly there, but not quite, because I think its length and its height and the overall bulk of it will be detrimental on balance to the street scene and to the amenities of the neighbourhood. And I am unclear, or the officer may be able to enlighten me about overlooking of the neighbours' gardens. I am in a very undecided state about this one. As I say, I think it's nearly there, and if we refused it and it came back with slight reductions, we could probably consent it without too much trouble. But I am a little worried at its present size and bulk. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Heath.
Thank you. I too am very undecided about it. It's a very nice example of a 60s house as it is at the moment. But the objector did raise some interesting points, because we're often told that we should not put too much faith in precedents. But now we've had an entire slide based on precedents. And the objector did point out that 75% of all of the approved developments have been done under delegated powers. So that's not a very desirable state now. We're trying to sort of, or it is being created to be a self-defeating prophecy.
Thank you. Members, we have a recommendation to grant permission with conditions. Can we go to a vote now on that recommendation? So the vote is to grant permission with conditions as the recommended decision. All those in favour?
Five, Chair.
Those against?
3, Chair.
Abstentions?
Nine, Chair.
That has been passed, members. Thank you.
Could you just confirm the figures, Chairman?
Yeah, it doesn't look right, does it? No, 17. It was 9 abstentions, 3 against, and 5 for.
Can we do it again, or are we? Do you want to go?
Well, I
Okay, let's vote again then. All, the recommendation is to grant permission with conditions. All those in favour of that?
5.
All those against?
4.
Abstentions? Members, that has been granted permission. Permission is granted. Thank you. Going on to the final item tonight, which is EPF 219721, the Gardener's Arms, York Hill.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just sharing my screen. Can you see my screen, everyone? Chairman, can
yes,
you see
we
my
can.
screen? Brilliant, thank you. Okay. Firstly, can I make members aware that the agent has emailed the council to confirm that the applicant wishes to remove the DJ booth from this application. This means that this application now seeks listed building consent for the repairs, including painting and upgrading of the existing 20th century timber windows and doors, the internal insulation of the walls and the repairs, including painting of the external timber cladding. It should be noted that the parallel applications that were on the same site under reference EPF 2196 of 21 and EPF 2028 of 21 have been refused. The grounds for refusal were that the creation of a patio and the introduction of a balcony for use by patrons in an area which previously was infrequently used would introduce an undesirable intensification of the public house use within a quiet residential area, resulting in an excessive further loss of amenity through noise pollution and disturbance, as well as loss of privacy. For those who live in close proximity to it, it therefore constitutes a material change of use. Insufficient information was also submitted in relation to the protection of the sycamore tree. The application property is a Grade 2 listed building, and the details submitted with application EPF 2028 of 21 were insufficient to fully and properly assess the development in terms of its impact on the special significance of the heritage asset. This slide shows the application site outlined in red. It's located on the southern side of York Hill. The Gardener's Arms is a Grade 2 listed public house located within the York Hill Conservation Area. Originally a cottage built in the late 17th century, the building has been subsequently extended in the 19th and 20th century. The parts of the building subject to this listed building consent application dates from early 20th century, shown here. The statement of significance produced to support the application advised that this part of the listed building is of low or moderate significance. The fabric, including the windows, being mainly 20th century with a vernacular materials used at a rudimentary level of craftsmanship. After the site visit, the conservation team support these findings. This block plan highlights the location of the function room shaded in yellow. This application is being presented to members today because the Town Council has objected along with more than one of neighbour. Concerns raised are listed on pages 43 to 46 of the agenda. To summarise, they include the existing nuisance already caused by the pub will be exacerbated. The works will result in the site being used as a nightclub. Members should note that a change of use to a nightclub requires planning permission. The DJ booth, as a result of its size, shape and materials, would have a detrimental impact on the planned form of the room and the special interest of the listed building. The harm is substantial and there is no public benefits to offset this harm. The DJ booth should be removed and the room restored to its original plan form. A letter was also sent to members after the publication of this committee's agenda from the Hills Amenity Society, which in summary reiterated the above concerns and in effect were concerned that granting listed building consent will permit a permanent all year round music venue to operate where none had previously existed. By recognising the interconnectivity of the above application with other applications which have now been refused, planning permission should be required. The proposal will harm the quiet historical character of this residential area. The pub and surrounding area cannot adequately accommodate the number of patrons that will visit it should permission be given. This plan shows you the pre-existing layout of the function room. This plan shows the proposed layout of the function room, including the location of the fenestration to be altered. The DJ booth is no longer part of this application. This plan shows the existing elevation of the function room building. This plan shows the proposed elevations. This plan shows the details of the repairs and reglazing of windows A and B on the eastern elevation. The plans show the details of repairs and reglazing on windows C and D on the southern elevation. This plan details the repairs and reglazing of windows E on the western elevation and the door on the southern elevation. The thickness of the window frame profiles allows upgrading with slim double glazed units in accordance with historic England guidance on traditional windows. The upgrading should improve greatly the acoustic and thermal performances. Their retention and repair were therefore supported by the conservation officers. These photos show the function room. The bar can be seen in photo 2. This is the view of the function room I found on my site visit. The sound installation as of yet has not been installed. The proposed internal installation of the walls does not raise concerns from a conservation point of view. However, no details were submitted as part of this application, and therefore it's recommended that it's conditioned. The weatherboarding is rotten in some areas, missing in other areas, and bowed in other areas, and will need to be fully replaced. It's proposed that to also remove and retain the internal walls and finishing and boarding a section at a time and installing modern timber studs alongside the existing screws at 400mm centres to fix new studs into the existing. It's proposed to install a layer of 12mm thick ply boarding on the inside face screwed to the new stud work and reinstate the retained internal boarding. The like-for-like repairs of the existing timber cladding is a heritage benefit as it will ensure that the building will remain weathertight. It will also greatly improve its external appearance. Apologies members, this slide was made prior to the email being received, which removed the DJ booth from this application. This application now is solely for the repairs, including painting and upgrading of the existing 20th century timber windows and doors and the internal insulation of the walls and repairs of the external timber cladding. The remit of listed building consent regime is only to protect and conserve the character of the building as a building of special architectural or historical interest. The conservation team fully support the application as it will sustain and enhance the significance of the Grade 2 listed building for now and for future generations. Public nuisance would be outside the scope of Section 66 of the Planning and Listed Buildings Conservation Areas Act 1990 and would therefore be controlled by other regulatory bodies. It's for this reason that approval is recommended by officers. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Again, the ward councillors are councillors Bob Jennings and Caroline Pond. Oh, sorry, we have 3 speakers indeed. We have Mr. Nick Davey, the objector, who is on Zoom, I believe. Thank you. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Davey.
Thank you. Good evening. I would like to say that it's rather unfortunate that we've been advised at this very late stage that the DJ booth element of this application has been removed, and it would have been very helpful if we'd been told that earlier. I'm a resident of York Hill, and I'm speaking this evening to object to this application, both for myself but also for my neighbours and fellow residents in York Hill, Pump Hill and Queen's Road. The officer mentioned that there has been more than one objection from local residents. I believe there have been over 30 objections from local residents, and I note the application is also opposed by the Parish Council, the LRA and the Hill Society. In terms of impact, now that the disc jockey booth has been removed, that is somewhat helpful, but neighbours are already suffering from severe and extended noise nuisance year-round from the operation of this pub, which has intensified its use of the land to the front, and the repairs proposed here will undoubtedly result in greater numbers of patrons attending this congested part of, or tight part of Loughton. It's in the heart of the conservation area. Committee will be aware that the premises are at the top of York Hill. This is clearly set out in the supporting statement, and indeed the statement said that York Hill is a peaceful residential area that benefits from the tranquility. Noise that will result from ever greater numbers of patrons attending this pub will result, and the impact in our view will fail the tests set out in policy DBE 9 and HC 6 of the adopted local plan. The officer mentioned that noise nuisance and public nuisance cannot be considered here, but the council should be mindful that it has a duty to prevent statutory nuisance as defined by Part 3 of the 1990 Environmental Protection Act. And residents are strongly of the view that further intensification of the use of this pub will result in continued and unlawful interference with the use and enjoyment of adjoining and nearby properties. In closing, the Gardens Arms Public House is already subject to a noise abatement notice and is now subject to an enforcement action for breach of the noise abatement notice, and is also subject to an impending licence review. And in these circumstances, it seems most surprising that further intensification is effectively being endorsed here by the proposal to grant a listed building consent. We call for the application to be refused. Thank you.
Thank you. The second speaker is Councillor Carol Davies, who is in the chamber, I believe.
Good evening, Chairman and committee members. Yes, my name is Councillor Carol Davies. I'm here as the Deputy Chairman of Loughton Town Council's Planning and Licensing Committee. And on behalf of Loughton Town Council, I wish to strongly object to this application. The Gardeners Arms is a listed building situated very close to the forest, as you've seen. It sits at the top of York Hill, which is a quiet residential road in the conservation area. And this gives the pub a commanding position over the surrounding neighbourhood. So any noise emanating from this pub doesn't just stay in the locality, it spreads over the wide area. However, the Gardeners Arms has been intrinsically altered by the current owners without permission. This is extremely detrimental to both the setting of this 17th century building, this part of York Hill, and the wider surrounding area. These alterations include installing a completely and out-of-keeping raised DJ booth, which, yes, it would have been very good if we'd heard about that they were going to be changing that, but there's still a lot of problems with what they've been doing. This is quite inappropriate for a small pub in a quiet residential road by its large size, shape, elevated position and materials used, and the change of use is very negatively affects the special interest of this listed building. The noise that emanates from this from the pub, it has resulted in a number of serious issues, namely damage to the listed building itself, increase in footfall, increase in traffic, and a negative impact on the SAC. Noise and light pollution, antisocial behaviour, plus frequent attendance, by the police, problems with drugs, and one wonders if this is a new bar or a 15 or a Lux in the making. If you have heard the residents recording, I'm not sure that you have, but they've got a recording of the noise that emanates from this unlawful construction, you will appreciate the point even more. Also, it negatively impacts the amenity, health and well-being of local residents, as I'm sure you can appreciate if you live next door to this. Additional damage to the forest and flora and fauna also happens. I hope you'll agree this is unacceptable, and I urge the committee to vote against this application. I also urge the enforcement officers to issue an order ASAP to restore the removed features, rectify the damage that has been caused and protect the amenity of the residents. The benefits will include the historic Gardener's Arms returned to its former state and retaining its intrinsic character of the area, reducing the light and noise pollution, reducing customer overcrowding, cutting the amount of littering around the area, reducing the negative impact on limited council and police resources, restoring the amenity of the neighbours and restoring the forest, flora and fauna and protecting the SAC. Thank you.
The third speaker is the applicant's agent, Jennifer Thompson, who is on Zoom, I believe. Good evening, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, thank you.
This listed building application relates to the Gardener's Arms located in York Hill. It is, as the office described, a 17th century building, now a public house that also serves food. Like many historic buildings, it has evolved over time, and the application relates to the rectangular side addition with the pitched roof as indicated by the officer. It's most recently used as a function room. The building has suffered from the effects of weathering and age. As a result, the frames to all of the existing window and door casements on this part of the building have perished. This application now seeks to repair the perished frames and take the opportunity to reglaze the existing panes in a thicker glass to enhance the thermal and acoustic qualities. The Conservation Officer has supported this approach. At the same time, the building's thermal performance is sought to be improved with the provision of insulation between the frame and cladding, as that previously provided has also perished and decayed. Finally, the applicant seeks to repair the external cladding to match that which presently exists. The result would be an enhancement to the existing building, creating a room and space that has improved thermal and acoustic performance. The applicant had previously included the DJ booth in the application. Following public concern, this has now been removed from the application to allow the focus on the maintenance of the building moving forward. The landlord will remove the DJ booth shortly to resolve any enforcement concerns. As you will have seen from the officer photos, this structure was never finished and will be removed entirely. Mindful of the proposed thermal, acoustic and visual improvements to the building from this listed building application, I hope you will find you are able to support your officer's recommendation for the approval of this submission. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The 2 ward councillors are again Councillors Caroline Pond and Councillor Bob Jennings. Councillor Pond.
I'm not sure what we should do now, really, because I was going to against the DJ booth, but I was willing to agree with the second bit of the proposal on page 40. Do we have to perhaps wait for an official withdrawal of the DJ of that part, the DJ booth, before we discuss it?
I'll come in here if that's okay. So, firstly, apologies about the lateness of this. Obviously, we only had correspondence this afternoon about the removal of the DJ booth aspect of the works, which is why even the presentation still includes them as well as the report. So if we'd had more notice, we certainly would have advertised that and let all the objectors and the members know. We don't have to wait for the withdrawal. Obviously, the slight difficulty here is we can't alter the description, which does include the DJ booth. But what we are going to suggest is that we can add a condition which has been agreed with the agent, that the DJ booth shall be removed from the site in its entirety within 3 months, which is a sort of standard enforcement timescale. It sounds like the intention is that it will be removed much earlier than that, and obviously we could potentially change that timescale, but yeah, the suggestion would be to add a further condition just requiring that removal. So with that in mind, I will just reiterate this application is purely for proposed works to the listed building. It is purely for the repair of the windows, the doors, the cladding and the insulation. Obviously, as you've heard, there are a lot of other issues with the site. The case officer has highlighted that we've had a couple of recent planning listed building application for some other works that have been refused. Obviously, there's an ongoing enforcement investigation on there. There's other investigations and issues with the noise abatement side of things, the licensing. Obviously, they're outside of the planning remit. But this application before us today is purely for those proposed works to the windows, to the installation, and everything else that the case officers put forward. Arguably, these would actually improve the situation for neighbours because it would improve the acoustic or the soundproofing of the building and may offer some improvements to those. But no, as I say, we would suggest, and please bear in mind that we would be seeking to condition that the DJ booth is fully removed.
Councillor Jennings?
Thank you very much. I think we've all been caught a little bit off guard by the lateness of this change. I really do have some questions, I think, for Mr. Courtney. At the moment, the function room, to my mind, is called the function room, and it is obviously allows certain activities. Would those activities continue if the building were improved and repaired as laid out in the report? And if further activities in that room, you know, like a departure from what has been traditionally held in that room, e.g. meetings, that sort of thing, would that require planning permission?
Well, obviously this is something that some neighbours have raised. Obviously there's some concerns about whether any of the works that have taken place have constituted a change of use of the site. There are sort of concerns around whether this has or will become a nightclub. Obviously to date there is an ongoing enforcement investigation, so that's not been concluded, but to date it's not considered that there's been a change of use. As you say, this is a function room. You know, it can be used for functions. It can continue to be used for functions. Obviously, if that changes in the future, depending on what those changes are, it's all about fact and degree. There obviously may have to be further investigations, and that could constitute a change of use, depending on what those changes are. But obviously, it is a function room, and it can continue as such, with or without these particular repairs.
May I come back, Jim?
Yeah,
do we have a definition of a function, as it were? There's clearly, basically what it is, what I'm trying to get at is basically residents around who live around there are very concerned that this, the function room, as it stands at the moment, will be repaired and improved, and then will form the basis for another activity which they possibly may not like, they might like, we don't know, because I don't know what that activity is. So I'm just trying to get to the bottom of, if the building is repaired, then basically what activities could take place in it.
Well, I mean, a function room itself wouldn't be a particular use. The use of the site is as a public house. That's the entire use, and the function room is an aspect of that. Obviously, you can have ancillary uses within various uses, including public houses, but obviously they have to be connected to and not a wholly separate use. It's very difficult because what we're really talking about here is potentially raising concerns and refusing something now based on something that may possibly happen in the future, may possibly not. Obviously that's not the way planning works. We can't make a decision now based on what may or may not happen in the future. And if something does happen in the future, we would have to deal with that accordingly.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, I think when we have to look at the application that was before us tonight was to construct a DJ booth within the function room and to undertake certain repairs and improvements. That was the application. It wasn't an opportunity to review the operation of the Gardeners Arms pub. We were limited literally to those two areas. One of those areas has now been withdrawn, so that's finished with. And I think that was obviously for me, certainly, the most undesirable element. So that's been removed. I think it's fair to say that obviously we do not have a lot of Grade 2 listed buildings in Loughton, and we need to look after them. The function room, as I know it, and I've known it for 49 years. I went there when I was a student, basically, and I can tell you it's hardly, if at all, changed in those 49 years, because I keep going back. And, for example, the Hills Amenity Society used to have its annual general meetings in there, so we met them there on a number of occasions. I think it's important that the building is repaired. I don't want it to fall into disrepair, so I would welcome, frankly, the opportunity that the applicant has put forward for those repairs to be undertaken and to bring it back into a good, serviceable room. However, the problem is, and the fear will be, that it will then be used for other activities which will disturb local residents. So I'm very unclear about how to proceed on this now. I certainly have been in touch with local residents. I've read all the emails and spoken to a number of people about this, and I live down the road, so I'm perfectly aware of all the issues. So I'm very concerned about this, that it might go slightly pear-shaped if we get this wrong.
Councillor Owen.
Thank you. Yeah, it is a wonderful pub, a beautiful pub, and we do need to make sure it's repaired. But I genuinely don't know how the owners are getting it so wrong with DJ booths and live music and all this sort of stuff that's been going on. They need to work with the residents. What I was going to ask though is, can we limit what is done in the function room as part of the approvals? And by that I mean, can we say that music is not to be played in the function room as part of the approvals? Thank you.
Not as part of this application, I wouldn't say. Obviously, this application is a listed building application. It's purely limited. The assessment and decision is purely limited to the impact on the listed building itself. So we wouldn't be able to do it. But obviously, there are other means of controlling that. The licence obviously would control that. I think the objector did say that there's currently a licensing review going through. So obviously that would take into account that, and that would obviously have conditions on things like the live music, amplified music, hours of use, all of that sort of stuff. So that would be the correct mechanism to control that.
Councillor Pond.
Yes, thank you. This little building is called the function room, and indeed, as Councillor Jennings says, for over 50 years, and I've known it, it has been a function room with occasional use. I had written out some words objecting vociferously to the construction of the DJ booth, which I felt was a gross intrusion into the historic nature of the building, and secondly, likely to give rise to all sorts of trouble with residents whose concerns I entirely share. But that has been withdrawn by the applicant. I don't think we have any reason for objecting to the renewal of the windows and the weatherboarding, which has got into a sorry state by the neglect of either the owners or the occupiers over the last 10 years. This little building was in fact built as a shop. It was built as a grocery shop to be run by Eliza Grout, who was the daughter of the then licensee. And it served as such into the 1930s, and thereafter it was a boot repairer's. So it's had a variety of uses over the years. but certainly its established use is as a function room. I am happy that the remainder of the application, which has not been deleted by the applicants, will stabilise and indeed improve the listed building. I don't see we have any reason to object to that. As the officer said, we can't object on a prospective use, but we can, and I'm pretty sure the councillors and residents thereabouts will take note of any intensification via licensing legislation, and if there is a planning infraction, there will be a little form on Jerry Godden's desk the next morning. So with the addition of the conditions suggested by the officer, which is the removal within a specified time of the DJ booth partly constructed, its ladders and so on, and any other stored material affixed to the building, I would not oppose this listed building consent application.
Councillor Ballot.
Thank you. I'm not sure why it's so contentious on the basis the DJ booth has been removed. We may not like the property, you may not like the existence of it, but that's not a reason for it not to be repaired or maintained. I think it's a no-brainer in my view, and subject to any other comments, I think it should probably go to a vote.
I've got two other speakers first, but yeah, I accept where you're coming from. Councillor Wixley.
Yeah, I'm working on the assumption that the fact that the DJ booth is being removed wouldn't actually prevent the DJ from performing now. That's one thing, which I agree it may no longer be relevant now in view of this late withdrawal, but it is a matter of concern on the wider issues, which aren't necessarily planning issues. The other thing is I'm quite surprised that this planning application has come to us tonight, given the fact that apparently the licence is currently under review. I would have thought it would have been more appropriate to get all these other issues sorted out before we received this planning application. I do find it a bit curious that we've been faced with that. I don't know if Mr Courtney could comment on that. But the other thing I will say is I found the sound reproduction from some of the speakers tonight, on this particular application, quite poor. So I was struggling to make sense of some of it, to be quite honest. I think that's a point that ought to be borne in mind in the future.
Councillor Patel.
Sorry, Chairman, just one final point. It's with regards to the removal of the DJ booth and the time frame in which that takes place. I know Mr Courtney suggested 3 months. I don't know whether the committee feels that it should be removed quicker than that to alleviate any of the concerns that they may have, that it may still be used. And we could end up with a potential enforcement action. So, I mean, is 3 months reasonable, or can we ask for a quicker removal period?
Can we go for 28 days, Mr Courtney?
Well, I mean, yes, we can ask for less. As I say, 3 months is a fairly sort of standard requirement for enforcement. But yeah, we could go for less. I think the only thing we should be slightly mindful of is the time of year that it is. If we went for 1 month, which would be kind of the other place my mind went to, that would only sort of bring us up to the beginning of January, and as you know, it's a lot of people sort of close down around the Christmas period. I mean, we could go. It's up to members what you think would be reasonable, but possibly I don't know, 2 months maybe, 8 weeks, something like that. Yeah, I'll leave it to members, but yeah, certainly. I mean, I personally put the 3 months because, as I say, that's a fairly standard enforcement timescale. But that was purely my suggestion in that condition. It is ultimately up to members what they
on
think
a point
would
of
be
order,
reasonable.
Chairman, could we ask? Could we condition that no use be made of the construction within the function room in between now and the date of removal?
Sorry, Councillor Murray and then Councillor Wixley, and then we'll go to the vote.
I think that's an excellent suggestion from Councillor Pond. this was going to be retrospective, wasn't it? So I'm not sure. I mean, obviously we can't be unreasonable, but I'm not sure that we should seek to bend over to be reasonable either. I think we should be minimalistic and give him the shortest time that the law allows. I mean, I'm tempted to say I know some lads who could do it tomorrow, but that's probably... I mean, I do, but I don't think that's probably a fair enough offer. But I think we should get him to do it as quick as the law allows us to.
Thank you. Councillor Wixley, coming back.
Well, my question has probably been overtaken by events, but I did specifically ask about a question for Mr Courtney, if he could explain why this was before us tonight when the licence is under review. That it seems to me there needs to be some joined up working between the different departments and the council. But perhaps Mr Courtney would like to comment and...
Yeah, sure, no, I'm happy to come back on that. I mean, obviously this isn't... The problem is, again, it goes back to what this application is. This application is a listed building application. We are only looking at the impacts on the listed building, you know, what the impacts are on that listed building. Obviously, it's slightly relevant now with the DJ booth being removed, but, you know, this was put forward because the Conservation Officer didn't have any concerns or objections about the DJ booth, which members may have disagreed with, and that's fine. Obviously, it's now not under consideration here, but ultimately we are purely looking at the impacts on the listed building. In this instance, we're not looking at the licensing, we're not looking at the impacts on the neighbours and the disturbance. As the case officer pointed out earlier, we have refused a recent planning application for the intensification of use to the rear and for a new terrace because of that very reason. We understand the ongoing concerns of the neighbours, and obviously we'll continue to work with the licensing department and our colleagues in environmental health. But this particular application, there would have been no reason to delay it because of any licensing review.
Thank you. Members, I think what I'm going to suggest we do is go to a vote on granting permission with the additional condition. And as chair, I've come up with a condition to remove the DJ booth within 6 weeks. I think that's probably a bit of a compromise between all of the dates we've received, and that the use of the existing DJ booth before its removal within 6 weeks shall cease immediately. Councillor Jennings.
The only thing I would say is that 6 weeks takes you through Christmas and the New Year, profitable times.
Should we try 8 weeks, 7 weeks?
No, I'd do it before then.
Oh, before then? 4 weeks?
Yes. 3 weeks.
Any advance on 3 weeks? Yeah, but the condition states that the use shall cease immediately. So we give them time to get rid of it, but it has no... Okay, so the vote is to grant permission with the additional condition that the removal of the DJ booth is... Sorry, the DJ booth is removed within 6 weeks and the use of the existing DJ booth shall cease immediately. Can we put that to the vote? All those members in favour of that?
Unanimous, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you, members. That completes the items on the agenda for discussion. Just going back. Sorry. Where are we? Item 13, exclusion of public and press. Nothing. Therefore, declare this meeting closed. Thank you.